When Ghost of Yotei was announced and I found out it has a non-linear story, I instantly got flashbacks. If you watched my videos before, you know I cannot stand non-linear storytelling, and I've got plenty of reasons for that. But Ghost of Yotei caught me off guard, in a good way. Not only did it pull off a non-linear story way better than I expected, it actually improved on a lot of what made Ghost of Tsushima great to begin with. And yes, I said a lot, not everything. This is not a perfect game, but to be fair, no game ever is. Perfection in gaming does not exist, and Ghost of Yotei definitely has its share of flaws. Some of them are pretty big too, but those issues are easy to overlook when the rest of the game hits as hard as it does. Also, a quick side note, I pre-ordered the collector's edition the second it went live. The mask looks incredible on my shelf, but no physical disc is criminal. You Sony. Still, I don't regret that purchase one bit. Anyway, enough about the collector's edition. Let's get into the real reason I'm making this video, and that's Ghost of Yotei itself and my full experience with the game. Now, as of me recording this video, I've finished the main story, I've completed basically all the side content, aside from maybe a couple of hot springs or bamboo strikes, but to be honest, those are all pretty much similar anyway, so I'm not really missing much. And let me tell you, the last time I sunk this many hours into a video game in such a short span was earlier this year with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is actually my personal game of the year, and I've played every new release that has come out so far. So how does Ghost of Yotei stack up? Well, I'll just say it up front so you know where I'm coming from for the rest of the video. I think this game is great. I'd give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. For comparison, I would rate Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 around a 9.5. And before anybody asks why I'm doing half points or decimals, it just sounds better, okay? Anyway, enough rambling. Let's first get into how I felt about the story of Ghost of Yotei. And don't worry, there are no story spoilers in this video. When it comes to the story, I'll try not to spend too much time talking about it because it's supposed to be a spoiler-free review, and most of you watching this video have not played the game yet. So the story of Ghost of Yotei has us playing as a new protagonist named Atsu. I've seen plenty of complaints around this decision, some justified, some not so much. There was discussion where people wanted Jin Sakai to return as the protagonist, but to be honest, his story ended beautifully in Ghost of Tsushima. There's no need to force a sequel with him. So the basic synopsis of Yotei's story has Atsu focusing on getting revenge against the Yōtei Six, the group responsible for killing her family 16 years ago. Now, I'll be brutally honest. The story is great with a lot of positives, but there are quite a few flaws. On the surface, it sounds like a pretty typical revenge story, something we've all seen 100 times before. Especially me as somebody that plays Assassin's Creed religiously, I've seen too much of it. I'll admit, I went in pretty skeptical, but after finishing Ghost of Yotei, I've got to say, it handles that revenge setup a lot better than I expected. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. I'll get into those flaws quite soon. But this is how I imagined a non-linear open world story being done. Each region has its own self-contained storyline with fantastic writing, interesting characters, and a few genuinely surprising plot twists along the way. The story structure itself is pretty unique too. I'd say about 70% of the story follows a non-linear path, but once you've completed most of it, it switches into a more traditional linear narrative. As I mentioned earlier, you play as Atsu hunting down the members of the Yōtei Six. Now naturally, that setup lends itself to a non-linear format, right? You are hunting down targets individually, and each target has their own storyline. For example, the Oni storyline is located in the Yōtei grasslands, while the Kitsune storyline is located in Teshio Ridge, and so on. I do think this approach was handled very well overall. However, there's a big issue that comes with this type of storytelling. When you write a non-linear story, the main character, who in this case is Atsu, cannot really change much until the structure becomes linear again. Their personality and motives have to stay consistent and the same across every regional storyline. That is exactly what happens with Atsu. This was my biggest fear coming into the story, and sadly it happened. I wasn't really much of a fan of her character. She felt a bit one-dimensional and her voice acting was just flat. Because the story is split into separate arcs, she does not evolve at all during that specific stretch, especially compared to Jin, whose character growth in Tsushima carried smoothly from chapter to chapter. That said, it's not all negative. Each regional storyline was very, and I mean very engaging, full of well-written side characters and some strong emotional moments. By the end of each regional storyline, I always felt something, whether it was sadness, shock, or just appreciation for how well it was written. The same goes for how Ghost of Yotei handles its flashbacks. I know some people might not like this comparison I'm about to make, but I have to bring up Assassin's Creed Shadows for context. In Shadows, there were Kujikiri, which only a handful of them actually tied to the main story. They served as flashbacks for Naoe and her father, but they were written quite weak and disconnected. Ghost of Yotei, on the other hand, does flashbacks so much better. From the very start of the game right until the very end, you're shown glimpses of Atsu's past, specifically the night her family was killed and the moments leading up to it. Some of these scenes are part of the main story too, but there are also optional ones you can discover by returning to her childhood home. There you can relive memories tied to her parents and even trigger short mini quests built around them. It's handled with a lot more care and purpose. Each flashback provides some sort of build up to the characters and gives most of that raw emotional feeling to the story. And then by the time the story hits its most emotional moments, you actually feel that connection to her family. And it's all because the game provided those flashbacks. Now yes, if this was a linear story, it may have been handled a lot better. But for a non-linear structure, I thought this was done well, because the flashbacks appeared at the right context when it needed to be. There is a super underrated part of Ghost of Yotei's story, and that's how you uncover more about the Yōtei Six. The way it's handled is brilliant. It gave me that same kind of thrill I felt when exploring Red Dead Redemption 2, and yeah, I said that on a community post, and people got upset, but I'm standing by it. The comparison fits quite well. Instead of the game just telling you where to go, you can find clues about your targets simply by exploring. You'll run into random NPCs around the world, or just, stumble upon small events that give you hints about the Yōtei Six's location. It all feels so natural and unforced. For example, in this clip on screen, I was just heading to an altar of reflection to unlock a new weapon technique, nothing major. But you see, out of nowhere, I somehow triggered a random event where I had to play a song to wake up a man resting on a nearby cliff to get to that altar. Then it turns out that he ended up giving me valuable information about one of the Yōtei Six targets, and that helped with moving forward in the story. Stuff like that just makes the world feel so much more alive, and it keeps exploration exciting. Moments like these can make freedom of exploration types of stories work quite well, because instead of the game giving you missions and you just go do them, you are literally discovering the story as you go, and that's what really sets Ghost of Yotei apart. And speaking of the Yōtei Six, I've got to give credit to Sucker Punch for how well they were written. Every single member of the Yōtei Six stood out. None of them felt like filler villains. I'm not just saying that because I recently finished the story either. These were genuinely well created characters that you could actually understand, even if you didn't agree with them. The writing gives you enough context to see their motivations as to why they were doing what they were doing, which makes each confrontation feel meaningful instead of just another generic boss fight, which another game sadly did. Take Lord Saito, the main antagonist. He especially deserves a lot of praise. His character was very good, and whoever did the performance capture for him absolutely nailed it. You could feel the weight in his voice, the restrained and calm anger he has. It all added so much depth. I just wish we had a bit more screen time with him instead of cutscenes. He kind of fell into the same trap as a Far Cry villain, where we know they are great villains, but a lot of the times they would only appear in cutscenes but not really with you, the player. Now, I will say the motion capture in general does a lot of heavy lifting for the story. It makes scenes feel alive in a way that static animation just can't. And to be honest, after seeing how dogshit the cutscenes were in Assassin's Creed Shadows, watching Ghost of Yotei's smooth, expressive cinematics was such a relief. It's also quite embarrassing because the development budget for Ghost of Yotei was a lot lower than Shadows, so it just makes you wonder. So yeah, it's quite difficult to go any deeper into the story without getting into spoiler territory, so I'll leave it there. Overall, it's a really solid story. I'd rate it an 8 out of 10. The only reason it's not higher is because I did not connect with Atsu on the same level I did with Jin. Still, it's another strong, well-written narrative from Sucker Punch that shows they have not lost their touch at all. I think the biggest highlight of the Ghost games is the overall presentation and how good looking these games truly are. If there's one thing that Ghost of Yotei proves, it's that a truly great open world game does not need to be the biggest or the most content packed. I'm looking at you, Ubisoft. What actually matters is how the world feels to exist in, and Sucker Punch absolutely nailed that. We saw this in Ghost of Tsushima, and I didn't think they could improve on that, but they did. Ghost of Yotei is a beautiful game, no doubt. The world of Yotei pulled me in right away, not because it's big or it's beautiful, but because of a different reason entirely. And that reason is because it's smart. I love that the open world in this game is built to pull you off the road every few minutes with something that actually matters. The presentation is similar to Ghost of Tsushima in that there is no minimap, there is no cluttered UI like most open world games do. You simply pick a point, the wind guides you towards it, and then during that moment of going from point A to point B, that's where the open world really shines, because every like 30 seconds, the game will sneakily hint at ideas along the way. For example, golden birds will chirp near something useful. You'll spot smoke columns that tease activity in the distance. And you know, those white flower paths basically nudge your horse towards something worthwhile, whilst also giving you a speed boost, which, by the way, the horses in this game are insanely fast. Is that just me? They feel like they are going 100 miles per hour, and I love it. Now, the great thing about the world in this game is I never felt lost or bored. In fact, I actually felt curious. I was around 15 hours in, still exploring, having only completed maybe 2 or 3 main story missions. That's how satisfying the world is to explore. I'm not even exaggerating. The random events you can stumble upon are so well thought out, and you can tell it was made with pure passion. I have plenty of examples of random events. I was wandering around when a fortune teller stopped me and warned me that a man would try to steal my sword. I shrugged it off, kept exploring, and then got pulled into a side quest later where a man asked to see my sword. That kind of early foreshadowing through a random encounter is such great world building. You also run into Ronin a lot. You might catch one reading a bounty board and suddenly they clock your face and they decide it's payday, so now you're fighting for your life. Or maybe you find 2 men practicing swinging their swords on hay. They suddenly recognize you, you fight them, and then at the end they drop information that points you towards your next main story lead. Stuff like that happens constantly, and it all feeds back into the main story, whether you realize it or not. Nothing feels like filler. Every single thing in this open world feels like it belongs, and that's what I love about Ghost of Yotei. It's one of the few open world games that doesn't waste your time. You could be riding your horse towards something, but something interesting will happen along the way 100% of the time. These moments make the world unpredictable, giving it that Red Dead Redemption 2 style sense of realism where anything can happen. One encounter that really stuck with me proves this point. I came across a burning house with a woman inside. She was crying over her dead brother who died in the fire. You try to convince her to leave, to save herself, but she refuses. She's a broken woman and she decides to stay. So you're forced to walk away, assuming that's the end of it. But if you return to that house later on, you'll find her body lying there too. She stayed, just like she said she would. It's such a small detail, but it hits hard and it's world building. That kind of environmental storytelling shows how much care went into this world. You can tell the developers took notes from Red Dead Redemption 2. And hey, if you're going to draw inspiration from any game out there, that's a damn good choice. And on top of all of that, the game is just drop dead gorgeous. The leaves blowing in the wind, the thunder and lightning whilst the rays of light peek through the clouds. It's actually insane how good looking this game is. I played this on a PlayStation 5 Pro with the Ray Tracing Pro setting turned on, and I was just mind blown off the scenery. No exaggeration, but sometimes I would just stop moving completely just to take screenshots. I would argue this game is probably one of the best games for a photo mode. Now, in terms of content within the open world, there is a lot to digest. For example, enemy camps or strongholds are better here than they were in Ghost of Tsushima. You can still clear them, sure, but they feel less copy-pasted. The layouts here lean into the terrain more, and you can very evidently tell that the stealth routes for these areas are much more apparent and handcrafted. The fun thing is what happens after. Most camps in Ghost of Yotei hide an altar of reflection, and praying at it gives you a technique on the spot. I think there are 61 altars in total, and they are great reasons to poke around. Of course, altars do also show up outside of enemy camps, usually tucked away in a vista or a small puzzle space. The game does a great job hinting when one is close, and the map highlights unclaimed techniques so you can go sweep them up later. If you are the type of person who wants to maximize the tree, trust me, go altar hunting early. You will never feel like you are wasting time. Now let's talk about the activities in the open world. Bamboo strikes return, and yes, they are still the same memory tests. I don't believe there's anything innovative about this that we did not see in Ghost of Tsushima. But then again, is there a reason to improve on this? They still raise your spirit meter, and you are definitely going to be trying to find them all. fox dens are trimmed down. I'm pretty sure there's a lot less in this game, and thank God for that. I felt like in Ghost of Tsushima there were too many of them, and in Yotei they are less spammy, and the actual route to the shrine is shorter and more deliberate. Of course, hot springs are also back. You hop in, reflect, and get a health increase. I do think the reflections that Atsu has are very simple. In fact, I do think I prefer Jin Sakai's reflections over hers because they felt more personal and impactful. Oh yeah, and of course you do see her ass, so there's that, I guess. Sumi-e painting surprised me. There are plenty of spots, and you know, the act of drawing something with the touchpad on the PlayStation 5 controller sounds like a gimmick, but the game frames each canvas so well that it feels very well designed. All I'm saying is compare the Sumi-e in this game to a certain game called Assassin's Creed Shadows, and oh my god, it's night and day. One is a repeated cutscene, and one is an interactive minigame. Something that's quite underrated in the open world is the shamisen practice aspect, where you'll have a certain number of songs to learn, and once you learn them, the instrument becomes a guided tool, so you play and it gently leads you towards collectibles. If you care about finishing the map, learn these early. It is a smart way to replace the classic checklist with something in-world. Wolf dens are new, and I love this gameplay loop. So you basically find bodies, you investigate them, and then a wolf barks and runs away, and you have to chase that wolf to an enemy camp. You essentially have to free the wolves from the enemy camp by killing all the enemies, and you will get rewarded quite uniquely because it's a wolf companion skill tree. And the wolf in this game is super useful, especially if you get it to fight alongside you a lot of the time. There is a lot more to talk about in the open world, but that's something I'll cover in the next part of this video, since those bits lean more into the quest design and writing. What I've been focusing on so far is the exploration side of things, so the altars, the bamboo strikes, foxes, hot springs, Sumi-e paintings, shamisen spots, and wolf dens. Now yes, that may sound like a ton of icons and maybe you think it's filler, but it's actually not, to be fair, because the world never feels cluttered. The spyglass and guided wind both play a massive part in that. They help you find things naturally without overwhelming you, and the game is smart about how much it reveals at once. If this was a Ubisoft game, I promise you would be bombarded with map icons everywhere before you've actually visited them. That balance that Sucker Punch gave us is what makes exploring so satisfying. If I had to point to one thing that really makes the open world work, it's the variety. Every corner of Ezo feels like it has something different waiting for you. Now let's get into what's probably my favourite part of Ghost of Yotei, and that's the side content. I touched on it a bit earlier, but here I want to focus on the actual quests and combat related activities. There's a ton to do, and what stands out is how thoughtfully each type of side content is designed. I mean, take the tales for example. These are basically the game's version of side quests. What I love about them is that you never really know when you're about to stumble into one. That same sense of discovery that defines Ghost of Yotei's open world is baked right into how these quests begin. There's no quest board, there is no glowing icon telling you where to go. You simply explore, you'll meet an NPC, and then before you know it, you are wrapped into a new story. Some side quests are pretty short and sweet, while others can last around 40 minutes long. One that stood out to me was about a woman named Huchi. It lasted around 40 minutes and it dug deep into her tribe, her son, and her role within Ainu culture. It's a perfect example of how the game uses side content to flesh out the world instead of just padding playtime. And the crazy part about these tales is that some of them have full motion captured cutscenes. Now that alone shows how much care and effort Sucker Punch put into even the optional parts of the game. Now I'm not saying these are groundbreaking stories, but they all serve a purpose. None of them feel like filler or fetch quests. Every tale ties into the world, the people, or Atsu's journey in some way. I think that's rare for an open world game, and it's a big reason why exploring Ghost of Yotei never stops feeling rewarding. Now the real standout when it comes to side content has to be the mythic tales. If you played Ghost of Tsushima, you already know what I'm talking about. This stuff is peak open world side content, easily my favorite part of Ghost of Yotei. There are 7 of them, 1 in each region, and every single one of them feels like its own little event with a unique vibe and a proper payoff. They're a lot longer than the common side quest, and the rewards are actually fantastic compared to anything else in the game. And I would say the best part is how each tale adds to the world in that specific area, while giving Atsu these insane trials to build her legend. You know, one of my favorites is a mythic tale named the Undying Samurai. So you're basically sent to the Ishikari Plains to track wind chimes. So you follow the bells into the wilderness, and it all leads into one of the best duels in the entire game. The armor you earn from it completely changes your playstyle, which makes it feel even more meaningful. Another one I loved was called the Spider Lily General. This one leans into kind of horror or suspense, and it's actually quite creepy in all the right ways. You explore a cursed estate that's being haunted by a former general that's just obliterating anybody who enters. You track down hidden keys and then eventually face off against that former general. It's such a cool mix of puzzle solving, combat and atmosphere. And yes, there's even a mythic tale tied to Jin Sakai himself, but I won't spoil that one. Just trust me, it's worth it. These quests are easily some of the most memorable moments in the game, and to be honest, some of the best side content I've seen in an open world game. Even the art style of the stories when they're being told. It's just evidence once more how much effort was put into this. And once again, it's side content. I'll say that again, side content, meaning you can go the entire game without even touching these. Okay, maybe I lied. The real standout side content in Ghost of Yotei for me is the bounties. I absolutely love these and I'm so glad they're in the game. There are 31 I think in total, and to be honest they might be some of the most addictive parts of the entire game. Each bounty is like a short assassination mission where you hunt down and kill a target somewhere in Ezo. But what makes them great is that they actually have little stories tied to them, so you're not just mindlessly killing people for the sake of it. There's always a bit of narrative or character behind each one. You can pick up bounties from boards at inns or straight from Kojiro, the bounty broker. Now the best part is how naturally these fit into the world. The targets don't sit there waiting on a glowing map marker. You actually have to track them down. Sometimes you'll get clues from locals, other times you'll stumble onto their camp or even get ambushed mid-ride. It feels unpredictable, like you are literally hunting somebody instead of following a checklist. They also tie perfectly into Atsu's story. If you think about it, she's already a wanted ghost, so it makes sense that she's out here hunting other outlaws. I do think it's the perfect break from the main story while still feeling meaningful. My favorite bounties were probably Soma and Shiro. Soma is this tragic one about a man who kills people just to keep playing his flute. He knows he's guilty and what he's doing is wrong, and the whole thing ends with this emotional moment where you both play music together before he peacefully dies. Then there's Shiro, which is the total opposite. His bounty revolves around a gambling minigame called Zeni Hajiki, and if you beat him, you take him in, and if he wins, you walk away. However, the catch is the coins are rigged. This bounty turns into a stealth mission and you end up sneaking around to swap the map before facing him again. And then beating him actually rewards you with a Sly Cooper mask as a little Easter egg. Those are just 2 examples out of 31 in total, and every single one feels special. If you play Ghost of Yotei, trust me, don't skip the bounties. They are genuinely some of the best side content in this game. Now here's where I think the game kind of falters a bit, and that is the sensei quests. Now don't get me wrong, I love the concept behind them. The idea of traveling across Ezo, meeting different masters and unlocking new weapons and techniques through their teachings is great. It gives you a reason to engage with the side content beyond just collecting rewards. But man, the structure of these quests gets repetitive fast. Each sensei quest basically follows the same formula. You meet a master, you go through a few training sequences or liberation objectives, maybe clear a camp or 2, and then you top it off with a duel or a short battle. The first time you do it, it feels exciting because it's something new, you're picking up a new weapon, and it gives that satisfying sense of progression. But by the time you've done a couple of them, you start to realize that they all play out in the same goddamn way. I mean, take the path of Odachi for example. You follow Master Yoshida, you clear out a couple of enemy bases, you complete a bounty, then report back. It's solid the first time, but the rhythm never changes at all. Even the follow-up sensei quests after, while cool in theory, just recycle the same loop. Follow, fight, meditate, repeat. Even the sensei quest related to the Kusarigama, which introduces one of the most fun weapons in this game. I like that quest for what it gave me, not necessarily for how it played. The setup is almost identical again. You meet the master, you fight a few waves of enemies and do some training, and then it all ends in a duel. The reward makes it totally worth it, but structurally it's the same old pattern. If Sucker Punch had mixed up the mission flow a bit, they could have been amazing. Still, I will give credit where it's due. These quests made me care about earning new weapons each time, instead of just finding them lying around. Again, I have to compare this to Assassin's Creed Shadows, where you unlock plenty of new weapons just for the sake of it, without any narrative build-up. So I can appreciate Sucker Punch for adding quests tied to the weapons. If you want a new weapon, there's a quest. If you want a new tool, there's a quest. Even if the formula gets repetitive, the feeling of mastering a new fighting style after a long sensei quest still hits pretty hard. So yeah, it's pretty clear that there's a ton of side content in this game, and that just about covers all of it. What's great is that none of it feels like filler. Everything adds something to the world and gives you a reason to keep exploring. Ghost of Yotei definitely builds on what Tsushima started, and to be honest, I'd say it does it better in a lot of ways by expanding the gameplay. That said, the new gameplay loop is not perfect at all. There are a few trade-offs that come with the improvements. Let's start with combat, because that's where Yotei, in my opinion, really shines. The switch from Ghost of Tsushima's stances to actual weapon style changes the whole flow. I like the idea of swapping weapons based on who is in front of me. Adachi for, those big brutes, dual katanas for spears, standard katana for the all-rounders plus the Yari, and a few tricks in the back pocket. It feels good to know which weapon type you should be using against certain enemies. It's not a basic combat system whatsoever. Parry timing still slappier as they do in Tsushima. Perfect parry stun just long enough to turn a mess into a clean kill. And there is that new yellow icon which I think wasn't in Ghost of Tsushima, which forces a charged counter, and this adds a nice bit of panic. Now get it wrong, and I like that your weapon goes flying into the air and onto the floor, which then makes enemies more aggressive to stop you from getting your weapon back. I do like that kind of pressure. Now, do I miss Ghost of Tsushima's stances? Yeah, I do a little bit. There was something so satisfying about swapping to stone or water and breaking through a shield like it was nothing. Yotei's weapon system feels deeper overall, but I do think it loses that quick reflective rhythm that made Tsushima's combat click right away. But speaking of combat, I do want to touch on the weapon upgrades. There is a Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 style blacksmithing minigame here, and I thought it's cool at first, but it gets repetitive really fast. It ties into flashbacks with Atsu's father, which is nice for the story I guess, but it kills momentum. Sometimes you just want to upgrade your weapon and leave, but the game drops you into a first-person smithing sequence anyway. Camps kind of have the same issue. The concept of it is amazing. You can rest to get your spirit back up, and even meet NPCs along the way, but the idea of cooking your own food and starting a fire is a bit questionable. It's fun a few times, but then you want to skip it because it's the same thing over and over. It helps immersion and world building, sure, but as gameplay it's so slow and I don't have time for it. Anyway, quick detour over. Let's now talk about stealth. Stealth is, in my opinion, very strong. Every enemy camp has tall grass, rafters, crawl spaces, all the stealth stuff that's here and polished. I will say I do think that the enemy awareness is actually readable this time, without those big ugly cones, and the gadgets feed into it nicely. You've got that one gadget that just shits out dust. There's kunai, which I do think is broken as hell. There's fire bombs, there's smoke bombs, then vanish while your wolf mauls others. What I love most is how camps are designed to be taken apart piece by piece. There are multiple entry points that actually make sense, and I often choose to go stealth even when the option for a standoff was right there. I don't think standoffs are bad, not at all, but I do think stealth here feels fast and worth your time. There are even skills that make stealth smoother, like faster assassinations and chain kills and so on. You can tell this game was built with stealth in mind way more than Ghost of Tsushima ever was. And the best part is, if you mess up, the combat in this game is so good that it's enough to bail you out, so you are not stuck reloading just to nail a perfect stealth run. Now, everything is not positive. The climbing system is easily my least favorite part of Ghost of Yotei. Well, the gameplay that is. It just feels unnecessary in a lot of spots where a straightforward fight or a stealth route would have made way more sense. On top of that, the game loves pointing out what's climbable in the most immersion breaking way possible. Yes, we've all joked about the yellow paint trope in video games, but to be honest, I don't think this is much better. There are so many cliffs and rock faces that are covered in white scuffs, basically screaming climb me. It feels outplaced in a world that's otherwise so natural and believable. The shrine routes and puzzle climbs are fine. I mean, especially that one where you go to Mount Yotei, I thought that was pretty relaxing. But during the main story missions, it's way too guided. There's no sense of figuring things out on your own, because the game practically shoves the climbable path in your face. It's one of the few times where Ghost of Yotei feels like it doesn't trust the player enough just to explore. After spending around 40 hours with Ghost of Yotei and doing pretty much everything, I can confidently say that this is one of those rare sequels that doesn't repeat what worked before. Now, that doesn't mean there is no repetition, there is a lot of it. I mean, it's a bloody sequel. It's similar to how God of War Ragnarok built on God of War 2018, or how Jedi Survivor built on Fallen Order. The same gameplay and everything with improvements. That's what Yotei is. It genuinely tries to improve. And yes, it doesn't nail every single thing it aims for, but when it works, oh man, it works. Ghost of Yotei's strengths completely outweighs flaws. The atmosphere, the You know, the presentation, the attention to detail, I think it's all top tier. You can feel the care and passion Sucker Punch poured into every corner of this world during development. It improves on Tsushima in so many ways, but again, it also reminds you why the first game worked so well in the first place. So wrapping it all up, when I think about what I want in a sequel, this is it. And to be honest, when a game makes you want to explore everything just to see what happens next, that's something special. So I would give this game a solid 8.5 out of 10.